How many discounts does USAA Auto Insurance offer? Too many to say here. Multi-vehicle discount, safe driver discount, new vehicle discount, storage discount, legacy.
How many discounts will you stack up? Visit USAA.com/auto discounts. Restrictions apply.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, I'm going to be talking about estrangement. I already have some podcasts on when you're considering estrangement or low contact, and this is going to build on that with an eye on helping you see that you can repair estrangement, and I've helped many people with that, and in fact, probably going to be writing a book about that soon, and I thought I would give you guys a little preview. Before that, I must tell you to subscribe. Most recent subscriber episode was on when women pre-initiate sex and how this is linked to overfunctioning. And the one before that was de-romanticize your life. And we have close to 200 others, including oral sex on women. So certainly make sure to subscribe to get 25% more episodes. Okay, so when I was going through statistics on estrangement, I found that, and this definitely dovetails with what I see in practice, 50% of estranged family members would be open to reconciliation if they got an apology. And this goes against what a lot of parents think. So in my previous podcast episode, it was designed to talk to adult children. This one is more toward the parents, because I work with a lot of parents who have difficult low contact or no contact relationship with their kids, and often they think that there's no possibility to repair. And in fact, 50% of people say that they would be open to repairing if they got an apology, and that is in fact probably less than would actually be open to it, because some people just can't picture it, and then when the apology were to happen, then they soften, right? And so people do not want to be estranged from their parents. There's like all of this idea now that there's some sort of social contagion and estrangement rates are skyrocketing. That's not true. Estrangement has always been a thing. And if you currently have an estranged relationship with an adult child, then it's likely if you go back through your family of origin, there were just similar things, may not have been called estrangement, but my mother doesn't talk to that side of the family. My father never talked to his brother after they had a big fight. After my mother emigrated, she never looked back, never contacted that side of the family, her mother, whatever. So estrangement didn't used to be talked about as much. It was a huge source of shame. It still is for those who are going through it, but there's a lot more talk about it, just like there's more talk about disorders. So then people think that disorders are skyrocketing like depression or anxiety. No, people were always depressed and anxious. They just didn't talk about it. There was no language for discussing it. And estrangement, just like depression and anxiety, run through families. And so I've helped a lot of parents and adult children with this because if people can get into therapy, right? So a lot of you are like, well, my kid would never come to therapy with me. I call bullshit on a lot of that, right? So you may think that, and you may even have thought that you offered them to come in for a session with your therapist. They don't want your therapist. Your adult child thinks that your therapist is just like you. And the two of you sit there together and bemoan the state of the world and how selfish and entitled adult children are now. You know, and however, if you get to a therapist that is non-biased, that isn't your therapist, right, then you may be able to make headway. People that are in their 20s and 30s and even 40s, I mean, even beyond that, obviously, I have clients all the way up through their 70s, you know, but young people love therapy now. So a huge step to potentially reconciling for many is to invite the child to come in to see a brand new therapist, right? A therapist that is not allied with the parent and is not allied with the child. So somebody who's really in between ages and cannot be thought to be a representative of either side. And another important piece, even before this whole therapy thing, is to do your own work individually. So a lot of parents make this mistake where they say, okay, well, I'll get them into family therapy. Okay, I get your point. You know, I'll get a non-biased person. But because they haven't done any individual work, it's going to go poorly. And then they are, again, going to say that this is a waste of time, a useless thing. The child will never, in fact, reconcile with them. But the reality is that they were defensive in that therapy. They didn't come forward. They hadn't done their own work. The most important thing that I've seen make a change for adult children in the situation where they feel that a parent was uncaring, where they felt a parent was even abusive or neglectful or selfish or boundary violating or any of these things, the most important, impactful variable I've seen is when the parent does their own work and the parent can have an explanation for why they acted as they did. Now, a lot of adults in different eras, so in the parent generation that I'm talking to now, you feel like you're throwing your own parents under the bus in any way by blaming them for anything. So you say things like, oh, my family was great. They never had problems like this. My mother was a great mother. And you don't go any deeper on it. But in reality, you learned your parenting style somewhere. And so if you could say something like, well, in my family growing up, we did have the silent treatment. And I've realized that that's why I've done the silent treatment. I used to do the silent treatment to you, and I apologize. And I never kind of really connected it. I never realized that that's why I was doing it. And I see that it was super hard on you, and it was really dysfunctional of me to do it. That's the sort of engagement that can really change the frame for an adult child. When there is a link made between why you do what you did, whatever it is that they feel was really hurtful, and how you yourself were raised. Now, when doesn't this work? So I call it basically excuse versus explanation. And explanation is what I just did. Oh, I did the silent treatment to you because the silent treatment was done to me. I never thought too deeply about it. I thought that's just what you do when you're upset because that's what was done to me. I really regret it. You're coupling it with an apology. And I wish I didn't do it, and I see that it was hurtful to you, right? And an excuse is something like, well, they did it to me and it wasn't so bad, so I did it to you. Or, and this is another big one, what happened to me was worse. So this is the parents on the other side of the spectrum, the ones that are not saying that their childhood was good, but in fact are saying it was bad. They say, well, I used to get beaten, so I don't see what the big deal is with the silent treatment. At least I wasn't beating you like what I got at home growing up. Which is, of course, a point, but also it doesn't mean that the silent treatment was good. It just means that both the parent and the adult child both had what they consider difficult childhoods. It doesn't have to be the exact same thing that happened, right? The child doesn't have a split screen to say, well, yeah, that's worse. And I talk about that split screen idea a lot with my parenting clients because it's hard when you were treated really badly or you had it like really rough to then hear your child who you think didn't have it rough say to you that they had it rough. It's disconcerting. It makes you feel defensive. It makes you feel like they have no perspective, but they don't have a split screen. They didn't also experience your childhood. Perhaps in some sort of Black Mirror way, if you could virtual reality them into your childhood, then they would agree, yeah, you know what, that in fact was worse than my childhood. But you can't do that. Their childhood was bad to them, just like yours was probably better than how your parents grew up. Less poverty, more material possessions, more education, more opportunities, even if, there were very bad parts, it was probably worse because that's how it goes through generations. As I discussed, people try to be better than their parents, as you did, which is why it's so hurtful to hear an adult child say that in fact you weren't, a good parent in their mind fully. So this is this pride, this ego, not in a bad way, like saying that you're narcissistic. I mean, you may be, I don't know you, but but the point is this ego, the self-concept of being a good parent is so important to people that it's really hard when a child says that they don't think that you were. And then you cut off your nose to spite your face and you double down and you point out all the ways that in fact you weren't a bad parent. So you stop yourself from hearing, really empathizing with their experience, and then that stops the reconciliation. And so if there's not been any really owning of the problem, and like so many adult children tell their parents to go to therapy, and then the parent, instead of seeing that the child really wants them to kind of be able to engage in a more honest and genuine way, they think that the child is insulting them, because in prior generations it wasn't insult. Oh, you're so crazy, you need therapy, go back on your meds, you're so crazy, right? So that's stuff that the parent grew up hearing. So then they feel shame frequently when the child says, I wish you would go to therapy. But in reality, the child is saying, if you went to therapy, maybe we could communicate differently. Maybe we could actually repair and reconcile. And maybe you would finally understand what I'm talking about when I say things like, I think you were emotionally abusive to me, or something like that. And so the parent is really, then the parent says, basically, I have to jump through all these hoops. In a best case scenario, they do go to therapy and they end up by accident with somebody like me who's like a straight shooter, or maybe they try to, right? To end up with somebody like me or many of my colleagues who are straight shooters and direct and are able to say, listen, it's not going to help you to say that you're a good parent over and over. We can talk about how your self-concept has been really blown up, by all of this and how you're hurting and how this is bringing up stuff for you. But the reality is that you're going to have to change your communication style moving forward and interact in a much more open and non-defensive way. And then reconciliation may in fact be a possibility, right? So that's a best case scenario. And then the parent, goes back into their own stuff from their own upbringing. A lot of the stuff they did to the child was done to them. Estrangement runs in families, as I've said. In a not so good scenario, they listen to the child that says to get into therapy, and they get into therapy with basically a yes man who's really just says, oh, yeah, it's so hard. It doesn't sound to me like you did anything wrong. Like that's like literally some of the experience that some people have had in therapy, is they say to me that the therapist just kind of validated their experience and didn't really challenge them to think about what the adult child could mean, and what actually could have happened from the adult child's perspective, thus, unfortunately, making it less likely that there will be a reconciliation in the future, because then the adult child just feels like, oh my God, they did go to therapy and they don't even have any difference after it. There's no difference in how they engage. They're just as self-important, they're just as defensive, et cetera, et cetera. So point being, so then that's like kind of therapy, but is it really? If like therapy fell in the forest, is it really therapy? And then there's the parents who are much too defensive to even get into therapy. So they just become kind of enraged when the child says it. They say, basically, I don't need therapy. I never needed therapy. You need therapy. And I've been paying for your therapy for all these years. And I can't imagine how ridiculous that all these years I've been the one paying and facilitating and supporting. And now you turn on me. And then, of course, the child feels that the parent will never think differently. The number one reason for the estrangement is the closed-mindedness. That's what the adult child thinks, is that the parent is not able to see another perspective, whether it's that of their child or their spouse or them. And so open-mindedness, a non-defensive, open-minded way of communicating is what actually does lead to the possibility of repair and reconciliation, combined with being coached through how to communicate in different ways that do not involve passive aggression and guilt trips and all of these things that you may not think you're doing, but you may be doing, and we're done to use. You're like a fish in water. And many times, like, for example, I'll say to a mother, but she finds it insulting when you make comments about her looks, and she's like, no. My mother and I talked about my looks all the time. If I came in the door, my mother said, oh, what are you wearing? And then I would take her feedback because she only had my best interests at heart. And so yes, so basically your mother was critical, so now you're critical. And you may it was a different generation, a different personality type, a different dynamic, whatever, but you saw that as something maybe that you had to put up with, or maybe even you wanted to put up with it. Maybe you're a totally different person and you just love to be criticized for what you were wearing. But your child isn't that, but at least we know that there's something you could tell your child, which is actually, now that I think about it, if I dig deep, there was at least one time in my life where it wasn't my favorite thing that my mother criticized what I was wearing. Maybe just one time, maybe just for prom, maybe just for my wedding, And so therefore I can really understand both why I do it and why you don't like it. And those kind of conversations can be super transformative. And those can lead to a deep repair and a different sort of healthier dynamic moving forward. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed this. And of course, if you ever do want to work on family issues or individual issues or anything else, reach out to me at my practice, bestlifebehavioralhealth.com. And I will talk to y'all soon. Have a great day, guys.